She had exactly one rule when she moved in. No using her good coffee beans without asking first. I agreed. I had my own French press and a bag of grocery store dark roast that tasted like regret but got the job done. We were strangers splitting a two-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio, because rent was brutal, and I'd put a listing on Craigslist at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, like a man with no better options. She responded 12 minutes later. We met the next morning. She brought her own mug. Her name was Hazel. No, wait. I need to stop. Noelle Park. She showed up in a canvas jacket with a small rolling suitcase and a cardboard box held together by optimism and one strip of packing tape that was clearly not doing its job. I held the door. She said thank you without looking at me, which at the time I read as rude. I later learned it meant she was concentrating because the box was about 30 seconds from catastrophe. She was a physical therapist, 31 years old. She worked mornings at a sports rehab clinic near Worthington and came home smelling like menthol rub and tired optimism. I was 28, 3 years into a project management job at a mid-sized logistics company that paid well enough to make me feel okay about my choices and boring enough to make me question them anyway. We were polite the way two people in an elevator are polite. Good morning. Did you finish the oat milk? I think the heat is acting up again. The kind of conversation that keeps life functional without making it interesting. That lasted about 3 weeks. Then I got sick. Nothing dramatic, a bad head cold, the kind that makes you useless for 4 days, but doesn't earn any sympathy because it's not technically serious. I worked from home Tuesday and Wednesday, camped out on the couch with a laptop and a box of tissues, and the general disposition of a man who'd been wronged by the universe personally. I didn't ask for anything. I wasn't the kind of person who asked. I came out of my room Wednesday evening to heat up some soup I'd bought specifically because it was easy, and there was already soup on the stove. A pot. Actual soup, not the canned kind, with what looked like ginger and something that smelled like it had been simmering long enough to mean something. She wasn't in the kitchen. She was on the couch with a textbook, pretending to read it. Did you make this? I asked. I make soup when I'm stressed, she said without looking up. You can have some if you want. I made too much. She was not stressed. I would later come to know every variation of stressed Noelle, and this was not one of them. But I didn't say that. I just said thank you and filled a bowl and went back to my room and sat with the fact that someone had made me soup without being asked and then invented a reason so I wouldn't feel like I owed her anything. That was the first time I thought, this person is different. She borrowed my jacket in October. Not my good jacket. My old Carhartt, the brown one I wore to the farmer's market, and to move furniture and to generally not care about how I looked. She asked if she could grab it on her way out because it was colder than she expected, and her coat was buried in her closet. I said sure. She came home that night and draped it over the back of the kitchen chair instead of hanging it up. I noticed. I didn't say anything. The next morning it was still there. And the morning after that. I didn't ask for it back. I don't know why. I had other coats. But I think some part of me liked seeing it there, liked the fact that it had migrated from my space to neutral territory, and neither of us was making a big deal of it. She wore it again the following Saturday. I watched her walk out the front door with her hands in my pockets, and I went back to making breakfast and stood at the stove a little longer than the eggs required. My friend Donovan, who has known me since college and has the emotional intelligence of a golden retriever in the best possible way, came over that weekend and noticed the jacket draped over the chair. "Whose is that?" he asked. "Mine," I said. "Noelle's been borrowing it." He looked at the jacket. He looked at me. He did the thing where he doesn't say anything but his face says everything, which I found annoying because his face was correct. "It's just a jacket," I said. "Sure," he said, in the tone of a man who has never been more certain of anything. She found out I could cook in November. It was an accident, honestly. She came home late on a Thursday, the kind of late that means something went sideways at work, and I'd already made dinner. Pasta with a pan sauce I'd learned from a YouTube rabbit hole I fell down during the pandemic, and I'd made enough for two without thinking about it, the way you don't think about filling an extra glass of water for someone at the table. She stood in the kitchen doorway in her coat and looked at the pan on the stove. "You cook?" she said. "Sometimes," I said. "There's extra if you want." She sat down at the kitchen table without taking off her coat first, which told me everything I needed to know about how her Thursday had gone. I put a plate in front of her, and she ate half of it before she took the coat off. We didn't talk much, but it was a different kind of quiet than our elevator quiet. It was the kind of quiet where two people are comfortable enough that the silence doesn't need to be filled. After dinner, she said, "That was really good." And then, like she was adding something she'd been holding, "I had a patient today who won't do his exercises and told me I was too young to know what real pain feels like." "What did you say?" I said, "You're right, I'm sorry, and also, if you don't do them, your knee isn't going to recover." She paused. "And then I apologized again because I was raised to do that." "You shouldn't have." "I know," she said. "I didn't feel bad about it until I was in my car, and then I felt bad for not feeling bad." I understood that specific emotional math completely. "That's just being a functional person," I said. "You can hold your ground and still wish you hadn't needed to." She looked at me for a second longer than she had before. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, exactly." She told me about her family in December, over takeout from the Thai place 2 blocks over, that we'd started ordering from together because it was easier, and also because neither of us wanted to admit we'd started planning dinners around each other. Her parents lived in Dayton. Her mom was a former high school English teacher who now ran a small tutoring business out of their house. Her dad had retired early from a career in accounting and now spent most of his time growing tomatoes and reading presidential biographies in a specific chronological order he had assigned himself. She had a younger brother, Ian, who was a sophomore at Ohio State and called her every Sunday to complain about his roommate and occasionally to actually ask for advice. "Are you close with your family?" she asked me. "Close enough," I said, which was the honest answer. My parents were in Pittsburgh. We talked on holidays and birthdays and whenever someone needed something. No bad blood, just distance. "My mom keeps asking when I'm bringing someone home for Christmas," she said, "the way you say something to the room rather than to a person. What do you tell her?" "That I've been busy." She pulled a piece of tofu apart with her fork, which is true. But she's started doing this thing where she says busy back at me in a specific tone of voice that implies she doesn't believe me. "Mother tone," I said. "The worst tone," she confirmed. "I love her and I dread her calls in equal measure." I laughed. It surprised me how easy she was to talk to when we weren't being careful around each other. The invitation happened in January. She knocked on my door on a Sunday evening, which she'd never done before. I was watching something I don't even remember now, just background noise, while I answered emails I should have answered on Friday. She leaned against the doorframe. She was in socks, the thick wool kind, gray, with a small hole at the left heel I'd noticed before, and she had the look of someone who has been thinking about saying something for long enough that the saying of it is almost a relief. "My cousin Tess is getting married," she said. "In March. In Dayton. Congratulations to Tess," I said. "My family's going to be there, obviously. My mom has already called me 3 times about it this week." She paused. "She keeps asking if I'm bringing anyone." I waited because something in the air required waiting. "I know this is a significant ask," she said, like she'd rehearsed the phrasing, "and you can absolutely say no, and I'll figure something else out, and it won't be weird between us. But I was wondering if you'd want to come with me. As, I don't know. As a buffer. As a plus one. As someone who prevents my Aunt Gloria from asking me directly if I'm dating anyone for 45 minutes. As your boyfriend," I said. She pointed at me. "Technically, the cover story would just be that we know each other and came together." I wasn't going to go full. "Noelle." "Yeah. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend at your cousin's wedding?" She exhaled. "It sounds worse when you say it like that. It sounds exactly like what it is." She pressed her lips together. "You're right. It does. I'm sorry. I told you, you can say no." This was a weird thing to ask. She was already starting to push off the doorframe, and I said, "I didn't say no." She stopped. "I'm just making sure we're being clear about what we're talking about," I said. "What do your parents know already? That I live with someone named James. That's it." "And they're fine with you living with a man named James?" "They have opinions," she said, "which they've expressed. Multiple times. Which is part of why going to this wedding alone would be exhausting." I thought about it for approximately 4 seconds, which was not very long but felt like enough. "Okay," I said. "Okay? Yeah, I'll go." She looked at me like I'd said something either very kind or very stupid, and she hadn't decided which. James, Noelle, thank you, she said. And then softer, I mean it. I turned back to my laptop. The hole in your left sock is getting bigger, I said. She looked down. I know. I've been meaning to throw them out for a month. Don't. They've got character. She laughed on her way down the hall, and I sat with that sound for a little longer than made sense. The wedding was on a Saturday in early March when Ohio couldn't decide if it was still winter or practicing for spring, the sky doing that gray-white thing that means 52 degrees, and probably rain by afternoon. Noelle drove. She had a 10-year-old Subaru named nothing officially but which she referred to as the car, with a specific fondness that implied it was more than that. She wore a dark green dress and had done something with her hair that I didn't know how to describe except that it looked like she'd tried not to look like she'd tried, which is the hardest thing to pull off. I wore the one good suit I owned, charcoal gray with a tie she'd pointed to when I held up two options. That one, she'd said immediately, which made me feel confident about the tie and aware that she'd noticed I had too. We talked on the drive the way we'd been talking for weeks now, easy and a little overlapping, finishing each other's half-formed thoughts without making a production of it. She briefed me on the family like she was prepping me for a job interview. She was slightly embarrassed about needing to give. Her mom, Linda, would ask questions and remember every answer for future use. Her dad, Raymond, would shake my hand twice and not say much, but would be watching. Cousin Tess, the bride, was her favorite person in the family and had explicitly told Noelle she was glad she was bringing someone. The groom's name was Andrew. He was fine. Noelle had met him 3 times. Aunt Gloria was exactly as described, relentless, well-meaning, absolutely without a filter. What do I say if someone asks how we met? I asked. We met because I needed a place to live, she said. That's true. I know, just go with that. It's not romantic, but it's accurate and it's hard to poke holes in. What if they want more than that? She thought about it. Tell them I made you soup and you didn't give my jacket back. I turned to look at her. She said, even though she was the one driving, her mother found us approximately 45 seconds after we walked in. Linda Park was a small woman in a blue dress who moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent years managing other people's children and had not lost the habit. She took in Noelle, kissed her cheek, and then looked at me with the focused attention of a woman who had been waiting for this moment for a while. You must be James, she said. Yes, ma'am, I said, and shook her hand. Noelle didn't tell us much about you. She said it pleasantly, but it landed like what it was. She keeps her cards close, I said. I respect it. Linda looked at me for one precise second and then looked at Noelle. Something passed between them that I wasn't meant to see. Her dad, Raymond, was exactly as advertised. Firm handshake, quiet appraisal. He asked me what I did. I told him. He nodded like I'd given the right answer to a test I hadn't known I was taking. He asked where I was from originally. I said Pittsburgh. He said he'd been there once for a conference in the 90s. Good peerages. Best thing about Pittsburgh, I said. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but something. We were seated at a table with Noelle's brother Ian and 3 cousins I couldn't keep straight, plus one boyfriend of one of the cousins who had the look of a man who had also been briefed in a car on the drive over and was handling it with varying success. Tess found us before the ceremony started. She was radiant in the way brides are when they're actually happy about what they're doing, not just performing it, and she grabbed Noelle's hands and said, I'm so glad you brought someone, with a directness that implied the alternative had been discussed. Then she looked at me. You must be the roommate. Noelle made a sound. She talks about you, Tess said to me, ignoring Noelle completely. She said you make pasta and you never complain when she watches the same 3 shows in a loop. She only watches 4 shows, I said, but she rotates 3 at a time. Tess laughed. Noelle covered her face briefly. Tess floated away to be a bride somewhere else. She talks about me, I said. She exaggerates, said Noelle. She said the roommate, like it was a title. Can we please? She gestured vaguely. There's an open bar. That's not a counter-argument. I know, she said. But there's still an open bar. Dinner was where things got real, not bad real. The kind of real where you stop managing a situation and start actually being in it. We'd been good all evening, comfortable, appropriate. The kind of couple that looks easy together because they've been together long enough that the performance is gone. Except we weren't a couple. And the performance wasn't gone. We were just good at it. Or I thought we were. Somewhere between the salad and the entree, Noelle's hand found mine under the table. Not dramatically. Not a statement. The way you reach for something that's close to you, because reaching feels natural. I didn't move. I turned my palm up slightly. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. Her mother, across the table, was talking to Raymond about something to do with the centerpieces. Ian was explaining a statistics class to the cousin across from him, who had the look of someone being very polite about not caring. The boyfriend of the other cousin was eating his chicken with focused determination. My thumb moved once across the back of Noelle's hand, just barely. Her fingers pressed slightly against mine. We sat like that through the entree. When her mother looked over, she saw what she must have taken as two people being comfortable together in a room full of family, which was either a good performance or not a performance at all, and I was no longer entirely sure which. Her Aunt Gloria cornered me at the bar during the cocktail hour after dinner. Gloria was a woman in her 60s who wore a coral blazer and had the energy of someone who had once been described too much and had decided to lean into it fully. "So," she said as if we'd been mid-conversation, "how long have you two been a thing?" "A while," I said. "A while," she repeated, deeply unsatisfied with this. "She's been very private about you. We didn't even know your last name until this week." "Sullivan," I offered. "James Sullivan. James Sullivan," she said, trying it out. "Catholic?" "Lapsed," I said. She pointed at me. "Raymond's going to like you." I laughed, and she seemed pleased with herself. Gloria said, shifting into something less interrogation and more observation. "She works too hard and she thinks too much, and she cares about everybody all the time without letting anybody do the same for her. You know that, right?" I thought about soup that wasn't for stress. I thought about a jacket over the back of a kitchen chair. "Yeah," I said, "I know." She studied me for a moment. "Okay," she said, like she'd arrived at a conclusion. "Okay, good." I found Noelle on the patio off the reception hall around 9 o'clock, after the dancing had started and the room had gotten loud. She had a glass of wine and was looking at the parking lot, which was not the most scenic view, but sometimes you just need to be outside. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm good," she said. "I just needed air. It's a lot of." She made a gesture that meant, "Your aunt interrogated me at the bar." Oh, God. She turned around. "I'm sorry. What did she ask?" "How long we've been together. My last name. My religion." "She asked about your religion?" "She concluded Raymond would like me." Noelle looked at me for a second and then laughed, and it was the laugh that made bad days take a step backward, the one I'd heard across the apartment for months now, and standing here it landed differently. It landed like something I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. "James," she said. "Noelle. I need to say something and I need you to not be weird about it." "I make no promises," I said. She looked at her wine. "This has been the least exhausting family thing I've done in years, and I've brought dates to things before. Real dates. And I was always half managing how they were doing and half managing my family. And I never felt like I could just be somewhere." She paused. "Tonight I felt like I could just be somewhere." I stood with that for a moment. "I like being your somewhere," I said. She looked up. "That's not weird," she said carefully. "No," I agreed. "I don't think it is." The parking lot was still not scenic. The music from inside was a Stevie Wonder song at a volume that suggested someone on the DJ staff really loved Stevie Wonder. The temperature had dropped to where you could feel it, but not enough to go in. She leaned sideways until her shoulder was against my arm. I didn't move. She didn't move. We stood there until the song ended. The drive home was quiet, but the new kind. The kind we'd been building toward for months without naming it. She drove. I had the passenger window cracked because I always do, even in winter, because I like the cold air, and she'd stopped mentioning it. The highway was empty at this hour, just us and the exit signs and the radio on low playing something neither of us was really listening to. About 40 minutes outside of Columbus, she said, "What happens now?" "Depends what you want to happen," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the most honest one I have." She was quiet for a while. Then, "I don't want to be weird around you. Whatever this is, I like coming home and you being there. I like that you make enough pasta for two without asking. I like," she stopped. "I like that you didn't give my jacket back." "I was going to return it," I said. "No, you weren't." "No," I said. "I wasn't." She exhaled. "So," I said. The exit sign for our part of Columbus appeared in the headlights. "I'd like to take you to dinner," I said. "On purpose. Not for cover, not for your Aunt Gloria." I paused. "For me." She was quiet for long enough that I watched 2 overpasses go by. "Okay," she said. "Yeah." And then, quieter, "I've been waiting for you to say something like that for a while." "How long is a while?" "The soup," she said, roughly. I turned to look at her profile against the dark window. "Noelle, don't make it a thing," she said. "It's already a thing." "I know," she said, "but let me drive." We went to dinner the following Friday. Italian place near the short north, small and a little loud, the kind of restaurant where they put a candle in a wine bottle and call it ambiance, and somehow it works. I made the reservation under my actual name. We were not pretending to be anything. We were two people at a table who had been circling each other for 5 months, and we were finally just sitting still. She ordered something she'd mentioned, wanting to try once in a conversation she probably didn't remember having. I'd remembered it. I didn't point that out. We talked the way we always talked. Easy, overlapping. A little bit like a tennis match where neither person is keeping score, except that I reached across the table at one point to turn her wine glass around because the rim had a small chip on one side and she was drinking from it without noticing, and she went very still for a moment. "When did you start noticing things like that?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "A while." She smiled at her plate. After dinner, we walked home even though we'd driven, because neither of us wanted to stop talking yet, so we left the car and we walked, and I talked about a trip I'd wanted to take to the Pacific Northwest, and she talked about an elbow injury she'd been rehabbing that was finally responding, and at some point my hand found hers on the sidewalk without either of us making a decision about it. She didn't let go. I didn't either. 6 months later, she still had my jacket, and I had gotten coffee-making rights to her good beans, which she issued formally one morning by moving the bag from her cabinet to the shared one. She didn't announce it. She just did it. I came into the kitchen and saw it there, and didn't say anything, and she didn't say anything, and we drank coffee together at the kitchen table the way we had started doing. Every morning, unhurried before the day started, I had a drawer in her room by then. She had 4 things in mine. Neither of us had done a formal accounting. It just happened the way things do when you stop trying to manage them and let them be what they are. There are exactly 3 things we decided on, the way couples decide on things, in conversation, over time, without ceremony. We don't go to sleep without saying what's actually wrong. Not a resolution, not necessarily, just the saying. We don't make the other person ask twice for something they actually need. And when one of us says, "I'm fine," in the specific tone that means the opposite, the other person is allowed to say, "I know. Tell me anyway." They're not dramatic rules. They don't cover everything, but they cover the parts where most things go wrong, which is good enough for now and probably for a long time after. On Sunday mornings, she still watches the same 3 shows on rotation. I still have the grocery store dark roast in the back of the cabinet, even though I've been using her beans for months, because some habits stick around longer than they're needed and not everything has to be cleaned out. The jacket lives on the hook by the door now. Both our keys hang next to it. That's not an accident.